Ah, the call of nature. A bundle of my favourite activities combined in one place. Enjoying the companionship of my pet dog. Soaking up the healthy, unpolluted air of the woods. Hanging around car parks. There must be a word to describe hanging around deserted car parks in the woods with your dog. What do they call it? Is it dogging? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's called dogging. Welcome to Blair Witch. It's a dogging simulator. Spoiler alert, this video contains extreme Blair Witch spoilers. Trust me. Blair Witch is a video game inspired by the cult 1999 movie The Blair Witch Project. For any of you who don't know about this film because you've spent the last 23 years held captive, living in a secret basement sex dungeon, sitting in the dark with no access to the outside world, and you've only just managed to escape, then holy fuck, why are you wasting your time watching this video? You need to get on the phone to the police, and don't run to the local cops. There's no way you could have been kept in that cellar for 23 years without at least some of the local law enforcement being involved. What were you thinking? Over 2 decades held captive in a sex dungeon, and the first thing you did was run to the nearest internet cafe and start watching this video. I will admit that I like your style, and there is a certain intrinsic logic to that decision-making process. However, I've seen enough horror movies to know that you have bigger priorities right now, because anyone who escapes in a horror movie is usually just being set up for an even worse situation. But please let me know in the comments if any of you have just escaped from a sex dungeon. But I digress. For those of you who don't know, Blair Witch Project is an iconic found footage movie, where 3 idiots set off into the woods to investigate the sinister legend of a notorious murderer, armed only with their own stupidity, lack of preparation, and a stoic determination to argue about who had the map last. Needless to say, the second they find themselves under any pressure, they all start squabbling like horrible spoiled schoolchildren. But despite absolutely losing their shit, the director does somehow manage to keep a video camera stuffed up her own nose the whole time, so she can film herself hyperventilating. The film famously used fake news and viral marketing to fabricate an entire online ecosystem prior to launch, and in some ways was the precursor to modern covert influencer marketing and player community manipulation techniques. I watched the film before making this video, and I can appreciate why it was such a cult hit in 1998. But by today's standards, it was a bit shit. It was very good with devices and tricks to maintain tension and keep you watching to see what happens next, but was largely without substance or any coherent message more sophisticated than don't wander off into the woods with 2 fucking idiots in order to investigate murder. A lesson that I personally need nobody to teach me ever. Blair Witch the game was developed and published by Bloober Team, who are an outfit with some pretty decent form. They made excellent games like Observer with the late actor and cult fucking god Rutger Hauer. They made Layers of Fear 1 and 2, both critically and publicly well received. And they made some other stuff that got mixed reviews. These guys are a relatively small outfit that sometimes produce superb games. Notably, their greatest successes have been in the realms of narrative/horror. Based on my superficial Googled research, they seem like a pretty creative bunch who sometimes produce great work, sometimes not so much, but they are well-intentioned, are not involved in loot box fuckery, and have a good reputation. They are a creative bunch and they try hard, and when anyone attempts to be creative and original, that involves risk. And when you take risks, sometimes it doesn't always work out as well as you expected. And maybe that's a key point when considering Blair Witch. I'm not saying it's a bad game, but it certainly won't be to everybody's tastes or expectations. The game itself is a strange kind of hybrid between horror game, walking simulator, dog patting enabler, interactive fiction game and emotional recovery potty trainer. It takes place several years after the events of the original film, and you play the part of a dickhead who tramps off to the wilderness to help search for a bunch of missing kids, in precisely the same scary woods where all those other idiots mysteriously disappeared over the years under mysterious and perhaps supernatural circumstances. I say dickhead because anyone with any common fucking sense would have noted all the foreshadowing, realised they were going into the woods alone, independently of all the emergency services on the scene, and thought, sod this, I'm not heading in there on my own, and fucked straight off home for a wank and a nap. However, because you are a dickhead, you faceplant into the woods with only your faithful digital canine companion, some assorted interactive tools, and predictably find yourself lost, cut off, wandering around a spooky forest trying not to shit in your pants. Regretting the fact that if you had made better life choices earlier in the day, right now you would probably be at home on the couch, sleeping one off. Whether you succeed or fail at shitting your pants is largely based on how many horror games you've played before. Judging from the Steam comments, Blair Witch scores a 4 out of 10 on the scary shitter-meter, which is a kind way of saying that it might not even terrify someone like me, and someone who is hardcore into serious horror games will probably maintain a rock-steady heart rate all the way through the game. Well, unless they lose their temper about some of the technical issues and bugs, of course. That might get their blood up. So what's my evaluation of Blair Witch? Fuck, who cares what I think? I played it for 2 fucking hours, and then I refunded it. Not even kidding. Then again, I just found out the game only lasts for 6 hours, max, so maybe I know more than I realise. Look, I couldn't bear to play this game, but it's not entirely the game's fault. I don't play horror games like this for a reason, and trying to force myself to review this game reminded me not only why I don't play horror games, but why I shouldn't be reviewing them. I get impatient too readily, I shit my pants too easily, and I get bored too quickly. So for me, horror games are just an opportunity to get bored and frustrated where the best possible payoff is that it manages to scare me enough so that I shit in my pants. When the best possible payoff from an unpleasant activity is the chance to maybe shit your pants, I reckon I'll pass. Then again, someone once told me that they never go to lap dancing clubs for very similar reasons. They didn't understand why people pay money for an expensive night out, where the best possible outcome is that you jizz in your pants. Coherent logic, I guess. As someone who doesn't like or play horror games, trying to bosh together a proper review on this game makes less sense than someone who has never played an MMO trying to review World of Warcraft Classic based on 20 hours of virgin play. It would have no fucking context, no fucking reference, and no fucking perspective. I'm also not prepared to do a video game industry classic cut and shut review, which have become so common these days. You know the drill. Watch a bunch of other people's reviews, borrow some game footage from a mate, and cobble together some uninformed Frankenstein review based on plagiarising bits of other YouTubers' hard work, all stitched together with the grisly sinew of official press release talking points, all whilst pretending you actually played the fucking game. So I may have only played this game for 2 hours, be completely ignorant of horror games and not be a fan of the genre. But at least this video is honest and I'm being 100% transparent about my lack of expertise, which is more than you can say about most mainstream game reviews these days. Just saying. For me personally, the perfect balance of video game horror and action gameplay that I have experienced recently was Metro Exodus. Don't laugh. But the part where you're trying to get through that facility and you're constantly being attacked by those spider things that run at you from every direction in the dark, which you have to scare away with your flashlight whilst trying not to suffocate and get out alive, was extremely well done. It was fucking scary, but it was entertaining and exciting too. Instead of boredom and stress punctuated with a jump scare, I felt tension and a pressure to get the fuck out of there whilst I still had some ammo and gas mask filters left. All the while being made to jump out of my skin whilst the little spider bastards are running at me from every direction in the dark and jumping out of every fucking shadow. You see, I'm not convinced that Blair Witch got the tension or the scariness right, and the gameplay action was a little lackluster. However, what Blair Witch did strangely well was the game environment itself. The graphics might have been a bit boilerplate, but the atmosphere, ambient sounds and the overall creepiness were very nicely crafted. If I took a girl on a date and I managed to recreate an atmosphere as equally creepy and as uncomfortable as this video game, I think I would be satisfied that I had done a good job. The dog/mental health/PTSD dynamic felt a bit of an odd creative choice. It was like the game couldn't decide whether it wanted to be a horror game or one of those interactive video game emotional support apps. And herein was my main issue with the game. I questioned the wisdom of having post-traumatic stress disorder as a game mechanic in this game. It's one thing to make a game about post-traumatic stress disorder, but having mental health issues as a bolt-on game mechanic was a bit fucking weird. I'm mental enough as it is. I don't want to play a game where I'm blacking out and having panic attacks. What the actual fuck? I spend enough time doing that at the fucking police station every week. I'm a firm believer in the therapeutic power of video games. Even on a basic level, people play to relax, distract themselves and for escapism. I've also heard people singing the praises of certain emotional and psychological support video games, which they claim help them through depression and bad times. So I support the basic principles involved here. However, I'm just not convinced that people with mental health issues, and in particular post-traumatic stress disorder, are going to appreciate buying what they think is a pure horror game and then suddenly realising that a core game mechanic is built around mental health issues. In a strange way, this is basically the mental health equivalent of the Tomb Raider rape subplot, I guess. Kind of awkwardly including a plot device to make the story more interesting without really considering that most people will find it incredibly uncomfortable. Perhaps I'm making too much of this, but I guess what I'm saying is create a horror story, create a mental health story. But if you are going to combine the two, you might want to warn the customer what they're letting themselves in for. I know some people with PTSD. I would be a bit fucking embarrassed if I'd given them this game as a fucking Christmas present. Here you go, buddy. Merry Christmas. Play this after Christmas dinner and try not to have a panic attack whilst you're having an in-game panic attack. Fucking hell. Considering more than half the population will at some point experience mental health issues, I just think it's a bit of an odd thing to have as a surprise Easter egg in a video game. As a side note, when I speak positively of mental health support video games, given recent events, I need to clearly state that I am in no way endorsing or promoting the likes of Depression Quest, made by Zoe Quinn. Yes, the same Zoe Quinn of Gamergate fame, who was invited to speak at a UN symposium where her, Anita Sarkeesian and others somehow managed to bewitch the United Nations and convince them that freedom of speech was evil, we should ruthlessly censor the internet, video games turn children into school shooters, and Dungeons and Dragons is, you guessed it, satanic. That old chestnut. The subsequent cyber violence report produced by the UN was such an embarrassing and unsubstantiated pile of nonsensical fuck that even the United Nations eventually became so embarrassed that they apologised for it. I mention all of this because this week, Zoe Quinn, author of Depression Quest, the person proven to have lied on multiple occasions, a person who raised over $80,000 for a Kickstarter game, which never got made, but who miraculously then had the cash to show up in a posh hotel in Japan, taking selfies of herself after she'd been out shopping for kimonos, that Zoe Quinn just launched a trial by internet against her former partner Alec Halauka, where she accused him of a litany of unproven, unreported and unsubstantiated physical abuse. Game developer Alec Halauka, co-creator of Night in the Woods, was immediately fired, cut off by some of his own friends, and tragically committed suicide a few days later. I'd kindly request that everyone remain civil until the facts are investigated and show all parties involved, including Zoe Quinn, the degree of respect and civility that she denied her former boyfriend. That's a polite way of saying, for fuck's sake, do not go and shitpost anyone or join the angry mobs. Let the police do their job. I don't know Alec Halauka. He might have been a saint or a complete shitbag. I've heard different accounts of him and he sure as shit had issues. But one thing is certain. He got punished for his crimes before any investigation had even started. He paid the ultimate price and never got a chance to defend himself. I guess the point I'm working towards is this. There ain't no point virtue signalling about making emotional support video games and claiming to give a shit about people's fifis if you are then going to destroy people's lives using weaponised mobs on the internet. If Zoe Quinn is the caring, self-professed expert on mental health and social values she purports to be, she would likely have a fucking inkling that posting accusations of brutal sexual and physical assault for millions of people to read might well destroy this guy's fucking life. It certainly looks like an act of retribution to me, and sadly, in an instant, one life was snuffed out. I cannot vouch for the good character of Alec Halauka. He might be a fuckbag and guilty of all these crimes for all I know, but this is why we have the police and the judiciary to establish facts, proof and guilt and set punishments. It's not perfect, but it's better than, say, just connecting 911 emergency calls straight to the local TV stations so people can read out crimes that random people have claimed you've done without a shred of evidence or proof. Maybe Halauka did all that stuff. Maybe Zoe Quinn rightly felt he deserved to be fucked over for his crimes. Maybe she was justified in going public. But I fucking doubt it. But regardless of my personal opinions, Zoe Quinn had better be fucking very confident that she was telling the absolute, provable truth and remain satisfied his crimes justified her destroying his life to the extent he no longer had the capacity to live. I'm sure this is precisely what law enforcement are trying to establish right now, and she will hopefully have her day in court, where she is made to prove it. The moral of the story is that some of these mental health video games are made by nice people trying to do nice things and make people's lives nicer, and some are made by crazy bastards with crazy agendas and may well try and put some of these fucking batshit crazy ideas into your head. So do your research before you trust them. All this being ranted, I can't stress enough, watch, listen, learn on social media, but don't, for fuck's sake, pile in. For starters, any hate that lands on Zoe Quinn's doorstep will be used as evidence of victimhood. My sympathies go out to Alex Halauka and his friends and family. Well, to the friends and family that didn't desert the poor bastard in his hour of need, at least. On a lighter note, the assistant's dog, Bullet, was a cute idea. But almost universally people are complaining that it takes away the feeling of genuine isolation, reduces the fear factor and just ends up being something you pat a lot because of an initial tutorial warning at the start. Basically, a four-legged comfort blankie that takes the sting out of the jump scares. Frankly, I agree with that criticism. The handheld video camera reality-altering function was actually a rather interesting and sophisticated mechanic. You can kind of time-slip things in the real world by using forward and reverse on the camera. I'm sure this is a mechanic that will be reused often in other games now. The user reviews on Steam were remarkably on point and pretty much summed up all of the game's key points, both good and bad. You can pet the dog! The first patch finally arrived and made my game utterly unplayable. The dog takes away the fear of being alone. Walking simulator. With a lot of bugs. It's a spooky forest walking simulator plus dog add-on. And my personal favourite, the The first 2 hours are fun, but after that it's just the same thing over and over again, and you are playing thinking to yourself, when will this be over? This is precisely what went through my head, actually. Only after 2 hours I knew exactly when it would end. It ended right that fucking moment when I requested a refund. And for the record, thank you very much, Mr. Steam. Or Mrs. Steam. I'm not sexist. The Steam user review aggregate is mixed. For a damn good reason. People who like this kind of horror/walking simulator with dog petting like the game. People who don't like walking simulators, annoying bugs, and horror games that don't quite do enough to scare the player didn't like the game. But there is clearly a market for horror game light. And that is what this game is. It's light horror. It's a lager shandy. It's like a really weak Canadian flavoured coffee. It's like the bunny slopes when you go skiing. These things might not be to your personal taste, but for some people, it's exactly what the doctor ordered. Not everyone is hardcore. So how do I rate the functionality? Well, if there was any functionality, I must have fucking missed it. I couldn't find a way to change my field of view, the key binding was hard-coded and couldn't be remapped. I think you could change some of the graphic settings if you asked them really, really politely, and that was pretty much it. Oh yeah, you could invert your mouse axis. Whee! Party in the streets. For good reason, a lot of left-handed players and people with different vision demands are quite unhappy about this. I don't fucking blame them. The game's customization philosophy seems to be, here are the fucking keys. Press them if you want. And if you don't fucking like them, don't fucking press them. In its defence, it's not really a game that requires optimised configuration. It's a mildly scary dog-bothering walking simulator. You could play most of it with a can of fucking beer in your hand. But if you're left-handed, or one-handed, or partially disabled in one hand or both, the lack of key binding is going to seriously piss you off. The whole interactive story weirdo interface was a ball ache at first, but I could honestly see what they were trying to do here. They were keeping it simple because they wanted to make you feel like some dude in the woods making choices with a cell phone and a walkie-talkie, and not feel like a video game. Not that most of these things were very useful most of the time. It's a horror story, for fuck's sake. Act 1, all your comms get cut off. First principles of horror. I personally found the dog mechanics fucking annoying. The combination of no field of view slider and the inconsistent dog placement meant I seemed to spend a lot of time not being able to focus the fucking dog. He would be right behind me somewhere, and I'd have to keep looking around only to realise I had to look right down and he was practically sitting on my feet or something. You could always hear that he was in a specific direction, but actually eyeballing him was a fucking effort. It's worth noting that there were a few launch day teething problems with this game, and some people were struggling with FPS and crashes. Then they patched it, and now different people got an opportunity to experience the same problems themselves. Right now, it does look like some people are just not going to be able to run it on their PC for the time being. I only managed to run the game once before it stopped completely. After about 10 failed attempts to launch it, I had to verify the integrity of the game files, and then it ran fine again. Still, it's the only time that running a game once corrupted the game files. Incidentally, when this happened, I kept getting an error script that included Epic account. Why the fuck would the game be fucking up over an error related to the Epic Store whilst playing on Steam? I don't know the backstory here. I've emailed the developer and got no response. Because developers ignoring me never happens, right? This game was pulled from GOG. I don't know if they were considering an Epic exclusive, but there was speculation. I'm just a bit concerned that they might have included some lines of code from Epic Games preemptively. I need to investigate this further. but I don't use the Epic Games Launcher because of many reasons, but personal security is definitely top of the list. I'm just a bit concerned that they might have one build of the game that includes code to make it compatible for a future release on Epic Games Store and other launch platforms. Code, perhaps, provided by these platforms. Effectively, you might be avoiding the Epic Launcher, but running Epic Games code on your PC without even knowing it, or what it's fucking doing. Because let's face it, Tim fucking Sweeney doesn't seem to know what his computer code is doing with people's private data, and he owns the non-Chinese part of his business. And Tim Sweeney would never lie. The TLDR, however, is this: the game basically worked okay for me. Some people can't even get it to run on PC, so remember your Steam refund window is ticking down if you have problems. Look, you shouldn't read too much into the fact that I played this game for 2 hours and then refunded it. It's more of a statement about me than the game. Trying to do this review taught me a valuable lesson. You can't make a genuine quality review about a genre of game that you don't fucking play and that you don't really fucking like. From my brief experience of the game, it seemed okay if you like that sort of thing. It isn't as scary as horror fans will want, nor as entertaining as non-horror fans would want. I think this stems from a basic confusion within the game. It can't quite decide whether it wants to be a Blair Witch Project full-blown horror game or a quasi-therapeutic exploration tool for post-traumatic stress disorder. It doesn't quite know what it wants to be, and a lot of players don't seem to know exactly what the fuck this game is. Go figure. This being said, it's not a bad game exactly, and it's trying to do something interesting and original. I'm just not exactly sure what, but as fucking vague as that sounds, it's 22 quid, and it definitely has an audience. I ain't going to be sitting in that audience, but someone looking for a more mellow horror experience might well love this game. I don't know, someone who used to love scary films but developed a mild heart condition. Frail people. Your nan. I don't fucking know, but I reckon this is a niche game with a niche market. And with a 2-hour refund window on Steam, what have you got to lose? Fuck me, that was the most non-committal endorsement I think I've ever made in a review. Jesus, I guess that it's the video game equivalent of saying, she's got a great personality. If you're a horror game junkie, you will buy this game automatically because there is no way a horror game junkie is going to hard pass on a video game based on the iconic Blair Witch Project movie. You will buy it, and then you will complain that it wasn't scary enough. If you're like me and you don't like horror games, you ain't going to buy this game anyway. If you're somewhere in the middle, then that's fucking perfect, because from what I can tell, this game is somewhere in the middle too. It's a soft introduction to the horror game genre. Blair Witch is an average horror game getting average player ratings. It has some interesting ideas. It's cheap, and it's not so scary that you'll be required to wear an adult nappy to play it. Subject to personal sexual preference, of course. But for now, good luck, and happy hunting. In case you hadn't figured it out, Blair Witch Project wasn't a supernatural movie at all. It was a murder film where the two guys in the group manipulated the girl into thinking they were being chased by supernatural entities. Who had the map? The guy kept the map. They got rid of the map. Then he lied about the map. Then they pretended to be lost, guided her unwittingly to a killing house where they killed her. The director was being set up all along. It's a murder film, not a horror film. Just saying. I told you there would be spoilers.